Good morning. On this first day of December, we see, starting in chapters 40 and 41 of Ezekiel, we see the picture that Ezekiel sees of the restored land of Israel and the restored temple. And so basically the rest of this book of Ezekiel, chapters 40 through 48, are going to show us a picture of the fulfillment of God's promise. I mean, Ezekiel is taken away in the 25th year of the exile. So, I mean, it's been 25 years since Ezekiel has been exiled from the temple. And the temple has fallen, the temple has been destroyed, and Ezekiel today in chapter 40 sees the vision of the new temple that will be constructed. And it says in the 25th year, the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was struck down. So, the exile had happened, and then, it was 11 years till the city was captured and everything, but it all ties back in together with everything that's been going on throughout the book of Ezekiel, with the word of God coming through Ezekiel to the people of Israel, that talked about the exile, that talked about the fall of Jerusalem and the temple and everything going on. And so hopefully the Israelite people will be able to see in this new vision the continued prophecy of Ezekiel that God is still promising to be true to his word. And, the Lord brought him up onto this place so that he could see, and he set up on a very high mountain, which was a structure like a city to the south, and he showed how it was all being measured out. And there was a cubit, and then there was a long cubit, and this cubit measuring device that was used in this example was the long cubit, which instead of being like 17 and a half inches was closer to 21 inches, which you think about if you add 10 cubits, 5 inches, that's 50 inches. That's, 4 feet. That's, so it makes a difference. It's like a nautical mile or a mile or a kilometer to a mile. It's just not that much difference, but different ways of measuring. And so he sees and he looks closely and verse 4, the man said to me, mortal, look closely and listen attentively and set your mind on all that I will show you. For you were brought here in order that I might show it to you and declare all that you see then to the house of Israel. So again, this is God speaking to Ezekiel saying, this is what I want you to tell my people. And, even though they're maybe not going to listen, they're not going to be able to hear, but these are finally words of encouragement. That the city is to be rebuilt, that the temple is to be rebuilt. And, there was a wall around this area, around the temple, and it's all there. I mean, and some of the images that Ezekiel sees of the temple are reminiscent of the temple that Solomon built back in 1 Kings with some of the windows and some of the different things that are in there and the way it's laid out. When we get into, around verse 20 or somewhere in there of chapter 40, it talks about an outbuilding. I wondered if I didn't turn page. Maybe that's further on in. That's in chapter 41 that talks about an outer building, another building outside of the temple that, there were many times that there would be a stable or there would be a barn or something. And that's, you think about, in the days of settling North Dakota that, that there would be, there would be separate stable buildings in these cities, for people that would be able to, put their horses and put their put everything in there as they were traveling, and so this outer building was very possibly that, or used for storage for hay and for feed for the various animals and different things. But as you read through Ezekiel 40, and I hope that you do take time to read a lot of this in the Bible rather than just listen to me ramble some days. But it's interesting to see the detail that is pointed out and shown. Then like verse 8 of chapter 40, he measured the inner vestibule of the gateway, 1 cubit. Then he measured the vestibule of the gateway, 8 cubit, because there are pilasters, 2, and and there were 3 recesses on either side. So very, very explicit vision. And you try to put this together in my head, doesn't work very well. But it's, you think about, you look at a photograph, and today I'm going to take off for Bismarck, and tomorrow, Friday and Saturday are the Pride of Dakota show in Bismarck. And so I have received a map of the floor plan laid out. And if I'd have been just told that, my booth is, that wouldn't mean anything to me. But when I see the map, I see the layout, see the picture, then I know where my booth is compared to some of the others. And I'm way at one end, and one of my good friends is way at the other end. Sometimes we're side by side, and we enjoy being side by side. But it's to be able to see the picture and to be able to refer back to the picture. And that's, like for Ezekiel, he has shown this vision, and then he is challenged with, remember this vision so you can share it with the people. And then to get it written down. So he's remembered it and shared it, and so that it gets written down, and so that we can see all of this, that we can read about it today. And it's kind of reminds me of, the storytellers, as throughout the ages of history, there hasn't been a lot of books and things until, the 14th century, when Gutenberg invented the printing press. But for the common person, number one, most people couldn't read anyway, but there was limited access to the scrolls and to written material. And so the stories would be told, and the storytellers, the historians would listen to the stories. And I remember visiting with the man growing up in McHenry, Ray Nickel, and he was very explicit in his description of the town and of things that went on, and of stories, and visiting with many other people over the years of their telling stories of growing up, of this and that and the other. And some people say, well, they just tell the same old story over and over and over. Well, they tell the story because it's important. And this is what Ezekiel is told to do by God. Tell the people the story. Remember the story. First, that's a tremendous challenge, to remember the story. To remember the story, and then to be able to tell it. And I think that's one of the joys I look forward to at Christmas time. We're in the season of Advent, 1st of December today, and the story of Christmas. And that's, Christmas Eve, we read from Luke 2, and Luke begins his gospel with, I sit down to write an orderly account of the life and times of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. And we have this beautiful story that Luke has told. And the Gospels, all four, tell the story of Jesus, and they're in somewhat different orders because they remember things in different ways. But yet the story of God's love and God's grace for God's people is shown here in this book of Ezekiel, in this prophecy and this vision that Ezekiel has of the vision of the new temple. And chapter 40 is, the whole of it is talking about, it's Isaiah's vision for the new temple. And it's like sitting down and looking at this blueprint of this huge building, and all of the notes of the builder, and all of the, they write along this wall, this one's 21 feet, this one's this and that and everything else. And, it's, the plan. And this is God's plan for the rebuilding of the temple and his people. And chapter 41 starts out, then he brought me to the nave, and he measured the pilasters on each side. So, started out, he was up on the mountaintop, up on, looking over, and he could see the city. And now he's right in there. He's able to see it. He's seen the measurements, he's seen it, and so he's seeing them measure this out. The vision isn't just God speaking, but the vision is the temple is there, created, and Ezekiel is seeing it. And it's just, and it's like I said, when you see it, it's much easier to describe it and to remember it. If somebody tells you something, sometimes it doesn't stick. Somebody tells you a story, but if you witness it happening, it's much more important, much more apt to stay in your memory. And this is what was with Ezekiel. The vision wasn't just God's words, but it was, the building was there, and Ezekiel was in it. And this is the way God, showed this new temple to Ezekiel, so that then he could tell the people of God's continuing promise and faithfulness.